and the handicapped and people with problems. There's always this compassion, this mercy, this great love. So
if I were to ask you, though, about differences in style, I guess in style as opposed to substance, because what you really seem to be saying is that in substance they were similar. But in terms of personality or style, how did they differ?
Well, they were just different people. I mean, they did so many of the same things, you know. Every Wednesday they have the audience, and they meet hundreds of people, and etc. So it's not that they...
Did one of them have a particularly good sense of humor, for example?
Oh, I think they all did. I'll tell you about Pope John Paul I. If you're the last, it was the last day of his life, and I was with him, and it was the last meeting he had with people. They were a group of bishops from the Philippines, and as the bishops went out, I was there to translate because he knew English, but he just preferred to speak in Italian. So as I went out, he said to me, he says, "Thank you for coming down and assisting." He says, I know you have a lot of work to do in your office. And he says, "Here, I disturb you by having you come down and spend this time with me in these audiences." Then he winked and he says, "Thank you, disturbed Monsignor." He said it in Italian. It has the same double meaning in Italian that has in English. Thank you, disturbed Monsignor.
Yes, I think that's kind of cute.
And with that, I thanked him and went out. That was the last day.
That was the last?
I was the last person to be in his office. The door was closed, his secretary closed it. He went up to his apartments, and 10 or 11 hours later, he was dead.
Was there a sense at the time that it would be so imminent?
No. It was a heart attack. It took us completely off.
Yeah. So that was you were the last person he saw.
The last one, but he, this sense of humor, and but also John Paul II, Paul VI. They all had a sense of humor. I don't think a pope could live without a sense of humor.
I would think with all what they would have to deal with. Yeah. Have you a sense of Pope Benedict?
Pope Benedict, I don't know as well as those others. However, when I was in Rome, I was one of my jobs at the end, I was the secretary of the Congregation for Bishops for 5 years, the last 5 years that I was in Rome. And Pope Benedict was a member of that as Cardinal Ratzinger. He was a senior member of the congregation, and we used to meet about every 2 weeks. And I was the secretary, so I would be in communication with him. I would call him and ask him on occasion to prepare certain things. So I knew him not only for those 5 years, but actually I had contacts, but they weren't real close contacts. But I've known him in that sense well, and that we worked in the same congregation, and he's always been most gracious throughout the years.
Well, I want to bring things back a bit to your work and what you do. And I know that one of your goals is to inspire more young men to enter the priesthood. I mean, you were obviously inspired by models. And
right.
I'm wondering, what are you doing now, especially in light of issues that I suppose are challenges for the Church in light of, for example, recent examples of priest misconduct, but also the issues of wanting perhaps a kind of financial prosperity, material prosperity that I guess people nowadays tend to look for. What are the things that you feel or you're trying to say would induce a person to enter this vocation?
Well, first of all, so many people that work with young people, that work with people here in the university, priests who have contact with them, will tell you about our youth today. There are many, many young people that are very generous. and they have great ideals, and they're tugged in many ways to go this way and that way, and obviously there are many attractions and many temptations, etc. But when they have this idea, and it's worthwhile pursuing, and they believe that it's something good for them to do, in which they can live a life with great joy and human fulfillment and human satisfaction, and at the same time fulfill a calling from God in service of their brothers and sisters, then there's great motivation. So what we're trying to do is have as much contact as we can with young men who are interested in the priesthood, and with young men and women who are interested in religious life, and to make sure that they have contact with these priests who give a joyful example. Because if there's no joy, then nobody wants it. But to make sure that they understand the joy, and that they understand also what priests are doing. And so, you mentioned misconduct, which is a terrible thing and a terrible scandal, but we're so proud of so many faithful priests and what they accomplish, and how faithfully they've served, and how much they've done, and how much they contribute not only to the church and to the members of the church, but to the world. So that's basically what we're trying to do, to attract young people. And as Christians, we believe in the power of prayer. Jesus himself in the gospel says, "Pray the Lord of the harvest to send laborers into his harvest." So we believe that there is this combination of prayer, of work, of getting to know these young people, to inspire them, to sustain them in their ideals, so that they will really have the generosity, even when it gets tough, even when there are the temptations, that they'll not give in, and they'll go forward, as many have done in generations in the past.
A student, say, who wants to do something in the world, change the world, make it better, who would come to you and ask, what can I do if I become a priest? What can I do to make the world better? How would you answer that? Well,
someone that would come to me if I become a priest, obviously he knows something about the priesthood. So, we would talk about the ministry of the priesthood, and how a priest is all about proclaiming the message of Jesus, proclaiming the commandments of Jesus, proclaiming the way of life of Jesus Christ, and of serving the people with the sacraments of the church, being with the sick, being with the dying, being with the youth. All of these aspects are, humanly speaking, if it's for you, if it's for the person, it's very, very fulfilling. But it depends on the individual having that particular vocation. But when an individual is interested, really thinks God is calling him to this particular role, and then he begins to just look at what the priest does, and then when he gets to know priests, and they can tell him in their own words, they can share their life with him, and what it means to be with the sick and the dying, to be at the scene of an accident, to be with the people in their joy and in their suffering, and to be with young couples in their wedding, and to be a priest at Mass, and to offer the people sacraments, especially when they're in difficulty, when they're in suffering, when they're in pain, when they feel alone. A priest also has the role of being a friend, of being a guide, of being a shepherd, because he fulfills, in the Christian belief, the role of Jesus, who is the good shepherd and loves his people.
Yeah, I would imagine for certain people it's clear when they know that that's what they want to do. I wonder if, to broaden it a bit now, the whole issue of the difficulties that are going on in the world now, and the conflicts and so forth, what do you feel the Church is doing, can do, to promote world peace, to promote a sense that that people should love each other, really, and not hate each other?
Absolutely. Absolutely. you know, the topic of peace, the topic of reconciliation, the topic of mutual love has been an essential part of the teaching of the Church, and a very special way of these recent popes that we spoke about. Mm-hmm. And so Pope John Paul II, for example, speaking specifically about peace. There's a World Day of Peace every year on January 1st. It's sponsored by the Vatican. To pray for peace. And there's a different slogan each year. And one year his slogan was, "If you want peace, work for justice." And so the Pope proclaims justice and the need for people to have justice. And therefore, if peace is going to be in Northern Ireland, if peace is going to be in the Middle East, there has to be justice. And then he says, if you want justice, defend life. There's a connection. Peace is not an isolated good. Peace we get to only when we take the means of peace. And so you're never going to have peace in the world if you don't have justice for people. You're never going to have justice if you don't defend their rights, first of which is the right to life. You're never going to have reconciliation when human rights are trampled on. And so the question of human rights, the dignity of the human being, every human being, from the first moment of conception to natural death, people that are handicapped, whoever it might be, everyone. And when the dignity of every human being is respected and recognized, then we have an environment in which peace is possible. Mm. So it's a great ideal, and certainly everyone wants peace, but we have to make sure that we take the means that are conducive to peace, and certainly among those, justice and the defense of life are very important.
I want to thank you very much for coming here to Drexel and speaking with us. It was a great honor. You're
most welcome, Paula. It was a joy to be with you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today at the Drexel interview.